Hello, and welcome to Another Thing. I'm Larry Menti. It is said that 1 in 68 American children have autism. And in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania, it's even higher than the national average. Another Thing's Ellen Kolodziej tells us what autism is and how some families are coping with it. Ellen.
Thank you, Larry. Whether it's a friend, a neighbor, or your child's classmate, we all know somebody touched by autism. And while so many families deal with this in their own way, we found one family here in South Philadelphia who really came up with a creative idea.
Santino Stagliano loves designing his special t-shirts with his now famous dragon on them.
I feel good about myself.
Why?
Because I'm helping people?
Santino has autism, and making these shirts not only helped his confidence, it also helped other kids just like him. He started a charity called Santino's Dragons and has raised thousands of dollars for special programs.
So he started to feel like he found his place on this earth. Because I always say, like, autistic kids, I think the biggest mistake we make is trying to make them be typical. I think we need to go into their world and let them be who they are, and I think they'll thrive. I know my son has thrived letting him be who he is.
But being who he is hasn't always been easy for the Stagliano family. Even today, with all the awareness about autism, Lisa says seeing how strangers sometimes treat Santino is still difficult.
It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling because you know that your child, it's not a bratty thing. It's not that they're not being disciplined or behaving. It's literally a light could physically hurt your child's eyes. A crowd can physically hurt your child, or a noise physically hurts his ears.
All the money from Santino's Dragons has raised more awareness and has created new opportunities for kids with autism. Next year, Santino and some friends will be the first group of children with disabilities to ever strut their stuff at the Mummers Parade.
How are you going to do it on Broad Street?
We're gonna strut it. We're gonna do our own strut, right? That's right.
It's just amazing. And they're all, now they have friends, they go to dances, they're doing things that all the typical kids would do on their own terms. So it's just been beautiful. And Santino pays for everything. It's totally free. Santino pays for everything.
So other families around the country have also come up with creative ideas. One man from Chester Springs, PA, has created an app called the Autism Village. And you can go on this site and find different restaurants and other businesses that are autism friendly. Reporting for Another Thing, I'm Ellen Kolodziej.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Joining us now with a deeper look at autism, Addy Bonet is the CEO of Jewish Vocational Service, and her colleague, Hetal Narciso, who's the Director of Vocational Services for the Career Center for Individuals on the Spectrum. Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's start pretty general, if we can, and where are we with autism now? What advances have been made?
I think we know a lot more about autism. I think we have a lot of programs that are specialized for those who are on the spectrum. So I think we've come a long way in terms of providing person-centered care for an individual with autism. It
can be troubling, even devastating when you have a child with autism, because sometimes you don't know where to go and what to do. But there are plenty of services out there.
Yes, there are. There's actually a lot of resources out there, from Autism Speaks to Autism New Jersey, and they take a deeper dive into services that are needed for individuals on the spectrum. For example, vocational services, and that's where Jewish Vocational Service would come in.
Right, because people that I've talked to in the past that have children that have autism say the hardest thing is, like when you have cancer, people can say to you, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. When your child has autism, sometimes you don't know where to go. And I'm sure you deal with that all the time.
Yeah. We have people with autism with very different personalities, very different skill sets, education levels. So every person is very unique. So you can't really just say one person with autism is the same. Everyone is very, very unique, and they have their own personalities, characteristics, education level.
I had one parent cry to me one time and said, I just want my daughter to go to prom. I want her to be like every other child. That's all. And she was crying when she said it. That's all. they want their child to be treated like every other child.
I think it's important for individuals to understand and bring awareness to autism, but also acceptance. And I think that's really key, because I think a lot of individuals just want to fit in. There's a social aspect to it that is challenging for individuals on the spectrum, and I think that's what's important in being able to being provided with resources that help them overcome those social barriers.
And that's why mainstreaming is so important?
Yes.
And explain what mainstreaming is.
Sure. So our work at Jewish Vocational Service is helping our clients get them trained so that they can work in the mainstream. So they can be in an integrated environment and earn a living just like everyone else.
And be schooled in the mainstream, right? I mean,
Yes.
even though they have to have some special services, you still want them in a class with everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's important for them to be able to interact with other individuals that may not have an autism spectrum disorder. You know, it's important that individuals that aren't on the spectrum understand the behaviors and the challenges of individuals that are on the spectrum, so that way it is more accepting.
Addy, I want to talk about the spectrum, because the spectrum was expanded. And I understand why, because it brought awareness and it brought funding. And yet, there are people on the spectrum who are severely mentally disabled, and there are people on the spectrum that just have some social problems with Asperger's. And the treatment then becomes specific to where you are on the spectrum. Does that hurt in diagnosis? Does it hurt in the services available, or is that not a problem?
I don't think it hurts. I think it just focuses the professionals who work with individuals on the spectrum to really look at every person as an individual. I mean, I can't say that enough about, just in my experience working with Jewish Vocational Service, I have met, you know, I call them the young cool guys, because they are so different. But what they do have in common is that they're articulate, they are fun to be around, they're brilliant, and they have their own very specific skills and strengths. And I think that's how we have to approach those on the autism spectrum. They all have something very special about them, and it's our job to make sure that people know that, and that surfaces when they're either in school or at work.
But does autism itself have a definition? How do you differentiate between someone that can't talk and really can't relate to someone who's can be brilliant and have autism?
So, I mean, it's a neurological developmental disorder, and I think there's a wide range of characteristics involved with autism. So that's the unique part of it, that it's not just one individual, it's not just one characteristics that you can say that this one person has autism. It's a spectrum in itself, and I think that's the most unique part, understanding the characteristics of autism.
But it wasn't always a spectrum. The spectrum was created.
Yes.
And it was, am I correct in saying the spectrum was created so that more people would come under the umbrella for awareness and for funding? Is that the reason behind that?
I think that's one of them, definitely.
And that's one of the reasons, so when people look at the alarming rate of autism growing, the widening of the spectrum has to be taken into consideration.
Yes.
That's one of the key reasons. But also diagnosis is better in what it's doing. Now the diagnosis normally happens at a time when people are getting vaccines. And I'm sure this is something you deal with all the time. Addy, what do you tell people?
Well, we at Jewish Vocational Service, we work with adults who are, you know, in school and aging out of school. So we work with parents who have already gone through a lot of those issues around vaccinations and discovery. So our role is really to make sure that they're prepared to live a normal life, to earn a living just like everyone else, and to be in the mainstream.
So you have the luxury of not taking a position on this?
Yes. Yes.
And that's good, because
yes.
I know it becomes political, but it seems like there is, and I'll just quote other doctors we've had on, it seems like there is no evidence that those vaccines cause autism. So we can agree on that.
Yes, that's correct.
And since you deal with adults, the mainstreaming of adults, is maybe more difficult than the mainstreaming of a child.
Yeah, they say there's at least 50,000 children that graduate out of high school and then do not have any more services and age out. And that's really where JVS comes in. We really provide individuals that are on the spectrum vocational services to prepare them to be out into the community and find competitive employment. Since we started our program, we've placed 86 individuals that do have an autism spectrum disorder out into competitive employment in New Jersey.
And some of them probably do their jobs better than people who are not autistic. Somebody told me recently that they're now experimenting with companies that hire people at certain points on the spectrum to do coding, because they are so focused and because they work at that round the clock. Is that what you're finding?
Yes, and that's what we do. That's our focus every day, is to find those gifts and talents and strengths that our clients have and place them in a job where they're going to be successful, they're going to enjoy what they do, and they're going to be really a contributor to that business, an employer.
And how do people get a hold of you? I'm sure there's people watching right now that are saying, oh, my son's 17, my daughter's 17, she could use this. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can definitely go on our website at www.jvsnj.org, and they can also connect with the New Jersey Division of Voc Rehab Services. We are a vendor of theirs, and they can get started with our program.
And what's the first thing you do when they call?
We actually bring them in to give them a tour of our facility and also do an intake interview process. So that way we can really get started and see what services are going to be ideal for them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Addy Bonet, who's the CEO of Jewish Vocational Services, and her colleague Hetal Narciso, who's the Director of Vocational Services for the Career Center for Individuals on the Spectrum. When Another Thing continues. An alert for pet owners. A disease that is potentially fatal to dogs has reemerged in the area. We'll tell you about it next.